prize is that how would you know how valuable the product is that you're giving the prize to, right? The great thing about intellectual property is you never make any money from intellectual property unless someone actually wants to buy the product, right? Whereas with a prize, you could give a prize out to something that no one ends up ever using, right? And so the benefit of a prize, right, is that you avoid the deadweight loss of monopoly. If you give a prize or you buy out a patent, then you can make it freely available for everyone to use. But you also might end up rewarding stuff that wasn't so valuable. In the trade-off between length versus breadth, one argument is that the deadweight loss to profits ratio is lowest when the price is lowest. So it might make sense to have a very low price, but then to have the patent last for a very long time so that you reduce the deadweight loss that you're paying for every unit of profits that you give. But some people have argued that if you don't give enough breadth to patents, then a lot of people will enter who are just copycats doing wasteful things. And so that's another sort of a trade-off. And finally, in the division between sequential innovations, one thing that you definitely want to do is put all the innovations together into one pool to reduce the licensing costs. But a question is, how should that pool divide up the value among the various people who created the products? And presumably, it should be based on which of their contributions was most elastic to the innovation rewards. And how do you determine that? I think that's an interesting question. Another interesting question is how economists can interpret the non-obviousness, novelty, and usefulness criteria, and how those interpretations could be used to guide the way that patents are actually approved or treated by courts. And I got done early today, so I'm happy to take people's questions. Yeah, Kevin.
I think earlier in the slides you said that innovation is always under-rewarded.
What? Under-rewarded, yeah.
Yeah. Why was that again?
Because innovations not only create profits, but they also create consumer surplus. And the monopolist usually doesn't capture that consumer surplus, right?
Right.
And therefore, there's going to be an externality, a positive externality from innovating, from creating that consumer surplus.
By rewarding, you just mean just from the perspective of the monopolist, like working through the market to gain profits?
Yeah, I mean, in the same sense that externalities are, positive externalities are a case where things are under-rewarded. Yeah. Great, guys. Oh, yeah, Matt.
Do you think that the tech patent should be much shorter?
Yeah.
So would that equate to a larger breadth or unrelated?
No, I would argue that it should just be overall lower protection for patent tech stuff. In that.
Is there any economic reason why copyrights have such longer term than?
I haven't been able to come up with a particularly good reason. I mean, you might think that these factors would, on average, be higher for copyrighted stuff, but I haven't seen any convincing argument that that's the case. But yeah, I mean, that's the analysis you'd want to try to do if you wanted to answer that question. Yeah, Charlie.
So maybe we can talk more about crime and whether we punish or fine it.
Yeah. So, one argument that Gary Becker made was that we should try to punish crime to the extent possible in the least inefficient way we can. So we should fine stuff as much as possible rather than throwing people in jail. Now, a problem with doing that is that a lot of people who commit crime are really poor, and therefore they couldn't pay very much of a fine, so it's sort of useless to fine them. But you could make them work in jail. Another thing you could do is you could give them corporal punishment rather than putting them in jail, which would probably be cheaper. Now, it's not completely obvious it would be cheaper, at least for some types of people, because if you beat them up, then they might become more violent, and if you put them out on the streets, they're going to go commit more crimes. So, but that was an argument that Becker sort of pushed. Yeah, Connor.
On the slide where you had a means of regulating patents would be to consider the usefulness of them.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of a slippery slope because you might not know how useful it could be in the future, other patents that could build off?
Yeah, I mean the sort of idea of usefulness, but I agree, it is tough, was that you can't just have a purely academic idea that's just relativity. You couldn't patent relativity. But you could patent an application of relativity to make a nuclear weapon or something like that. That was sort of the idea. But yeah, obviously lots of stuff is slippery. So like, is my quadratic vote buying mechanism patentable? Probably it would be. But like, would the argument that I gave you guys about how, you know, as you change the quantity, it looks like a Harburger triangle, be patentable? No, even though those ideas are very closely related to one another, right? Yeah, Andy.
So for your intellectual property versus prices part,
Yeah.
in order to reduce dead weight loss, would it be efficient for, say, the government to grant a patent for a few years, say 1 to 2 years, and then
Yep.
when they have a good idea of the value, buy it out after?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. That was one of the extensions we were thinking about doing on that paper. I think the issues there would be, one, there could be an incentive to like do something pretty manipulative during those couple of years to try to trick the authority into thinking it was more valuable than it was. And the second thing is that there might be some products that like take a while to get popular, and other products that like peak early and then die out quickly. And if you tried to sort of like do that sort of a system, you might run into a problem along those lines. But it's certainly an interesting idea. It's something I'd like to see someone look at in future research.
It actually does lead, it does actually happen with some products which have legal military applications.
Yeah, they get bought out. Yeah, I mean, it also has happened in the past, but it's not that common. Okay, great guys.